Hello everyone, it's lovely to be back with you again. It's been a long time since we told you the story of Joseph, and I wonder how much you can remember of that story since we were here last. He was somebody who came from a really big family, and he had loads of different brothers. I wonder if you can remember how many brothers he had in his family. He was also somebody who was his father's favourite in the family, and that was difficult for him, and his father made him something special. And I wonder if you can remember what his father made him. And he also was someone who had a gift, because he had special dreams, and he had the gift of interpreting dreams as well. And he had a dream about his brothers, but the dream the brothers did not like at all, and it wasn't a very nice dream for them, and it made them really angry with him. And one day when they were out, they decided they were going to be a bit cruel, and they took his coat and they ripped his coat off, and they threw him down a disused well and left him there. And then they decided they weren't going to kill him, which would have been horrible. They decided they were going to sell him to some traders who were passing by, and they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And that was the last they saw of Joseph, or so they thought. And he was taken away. But God was still with Joseph, we know, and he ended up in the home of somebody called Potiphar, who was the official, one of the officials who worked for the Pharaoh. And he was a good man, and Joseph was able to work his way up in Potiphar's household, so to be quite a responsible position. But we know from last time the story that Potiphar's wife was quite jealous, and she got Joseph into trouble. So much so that Potiphar threw him in prison. And Pete's going to come and tell you now what happened to him. We know God was still with him, but what happened to him next? Here's Pete.
So despite the fact that Joseph was in prison, and he may have just said, well, it's just not fair, I didn't do anything wrong, Joseph still knows that God is with him. So Joseph works as hard as he can in the prison, and the prison warden sees that Joseph can be trusted. And he gives him lots and lots of things to do in the prison. And one of the things that Joseph would have done was he took the food to the other prisoners. Now one day Joseph was doing his rounds of the prison, delivering the food to the other prisoners. It must have been great to have Joseph bring your food, because I think Joseph was somebody, because God was with him, who made a difference when he saw those prisoners in all their sadness and all the suffering that they were experiencing in prison. And one day, Joseph goes to visit two new prisoners. Two new prisoners had come into the prison, and Joseph arrives to bring them their breakfast. The first one was somebody who was I wonder if you can guess what they were, like what I'm going to put on. I don't know, can you guess? Well then, maybe perhaps if you watch the Great British Bake Off, maybe you'd know what sort of people wear these sort of things. He was a baker. He was the baker for Pharaoh. And every day he'd get up early in the morning, go to his kitchen, and he'd bake some lovely cakes and bread for Pharaoh, ready for the beginning of the day. But what happened to the baker was, one day he'd gone in and he'd got his plate of lovely things that he'd made earlier for Pharaoh. You see what that one is? I wonder if you like those. It's a bagel. He'd made a bagel. He also made a hot cross bun. Oh, I like hot cross buns. And then he'd made some sourdough, and he put some lovely nuts and seeds in the sourdough for Pharaoh's breakfast. He'd made some flatbread. I don't know whether you like your flatbread with your curry. I love a bit of flatbread. And then there was some pita bread as well. I don't know whether you like pita bread. I love pita bread as well. Made all those lovely things, and he goes in ready to serve Pharaoh his breakfast and say to Pharaoh, which of my lovely breads would you like for breakfast? And you know, Pharaoh had woken up that morning and he had a bit of one on him. You know what it's like when somebody has a bit of one on them in the morning? They're really grumpy. and he threw the food across the room and said, I didn't want bagels, I didn't want sourdough, I didn't want flatbread, I didn't want pita, I didn't even want your hot cross buns, I wanted pancakes. And he was so angry with the baker that he didn't have pancakes for his breakfast that he sent the baker off to prison. And so the baker is in prison. And Joseph meets him in prison. And then not only is the baker in prison, but another person's in prison. This time it's somebody else who was serving Pharaoh. And this person had a very special job in Pharaoh's palace. He was the person, oh, I need somebody to help me here because I'm getting all mixed up in my robes. He was the person who served Pharaoh his wine. So what the wine person would do was that he would go and get, I don't know, do you know where you get wine from? You get wine by squeezing grapes. He would go and pick the grapes from the branches and squeeze them into the cup for Pharaoh. So the wine taster would come in and he would say, here, I've picked the best grapes for you today. Pharaoh, here's your wine to drink. So he went in that morning after the baker to give Pharaoh his wine. And Pharaoh, as we know, was having a bit of a bad morning. He didn't like that. He said, oh, I didn't want white grapes. I wanted red grapes. And he threw the grapes across his bedroom and threw out the wine taster and said, put him in prison with the baker. So we find that the wine taster was there in prison, looking very unhappy. Wonder if you can do an unhappy face for me. Because he was in prison and he thought, oh no, I had a great job in the palace, but I haven't got it anymore. Oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And he was very, very unhappy. And also, Joseph found the baker. See, this is why I need you to help me, because we could have had some people dressed up for this morning. And he was there, and he was doing the same thing. Oh, if only I'd made pancakes, I wouldn't be in prison. If I only. And Joseph comes along to bring them their breakfast, and Joseph's quite happy, and he comes in and he says, whoa, what's wrong, boys? What's happened? And they tell him their story of how Pharaoh's thrown him in prison. Well, Joseph gets to know these two quite well. And one day he comes in and both of them are sitting there and they're looking very worried. Can you do them? Oh, you know when you've got something on your mind and and they're looking concerned and they're asking each other, and Joseph comes in and he says, can I help you? And they say, well, I don't know whether you can help us, Joseph, because, you're in prison. You're a prisoner as well, just like us. But we both had dreams last night, and we don't know what they mean. Well, Joseph looks at them and he says, well, do you know, God has given me the ability to tell you what your dreams mean. So tell me your story. So firstly, the baker tells the story. He goes, well, I'll tell you my story and my dream. What I'll do is I'll tell you what happened to me. What happened to me was I dreamt that I was baking this lovely bread for Pharaoh. And I was carrying it on a basket on my head with all my lovely cakes and bread in it going towards the palace, when these birds came down and started to eat my lovely bread. And I don't know what my dream means. Well then, the wine taster from Pharaoh's palace, he comes along and he begins to tell his story of what his dream was to Pharaoh. He says, well, I had a dream too. And my dream was that I went and I saw these lovely grapes up on the branches and I pulled them down and I squeezed them into the cup and it made some lovely wine for Pharaoh. And I don't know what my dream means either. So they were both sitting there and they were a little bit Well, I don't quite know. I don't quite know. Maybe you've been in lockdown and you've been doing your homework from school, and maybe you've had to ask others to help you because perhaps you haven't understood. Well, that's what these two did. They asked Joseph for help. And Joseph says, God will tell me what your dreams mean. So he looked at the baker and he said, well, the news for you isn't that good. The news isn't good because what's going to happen is that Pharaoh's not going to take you back. But he turns to the wine taster and he says, well, what's going to happen for you is that Pharaoh is going to remember you and he's going to bring you back into the palace and you're going to return to serving him his wine. But Joseph asks them and he says, if you get the chance, do tell Pharaoh about me, because I didn't do anything wrong and I'm in prison and I'm innocent. Please help me. We'll learn more about what happens in the story of Joseph next time. But Wendy's going to come and tell us a little bit more about our story for today.
Well, that was amazing, wasn't it? An amazing story. And even though Joseph was in prison and what was happening to him wasn't fair, he didn't say, it's not fair, and get really upset about everything. Instead of that, he worked really hard in prison and he became somebody that the warder trusted, and he was able to give out food to all the other prisoners and be kind to them. And he also took time to listen to them, even though he didn't know what was going to happen to him in the future either. He took time to listen to the baker and to the wine taster and to hear their stories, and he was able to spend time with them and to try and interpret what those dreams meant. And that meant a lot to both of those men. And that was quite unselfish of him, wasn't it? Because he didn't know what was going to happen to him in the future, but he knew that God was with him. And maybe that made him a little bit more capable, more able to understand other people because of that, because he knew that himself. And we're going to finish there, and we'll find out what happened to Joseph next time in the story. And we're going to pray together now. So can you put your hands together for me and close your eyes? Thank you, Lord Jesus, for the story of Joseph today. Thank you that he was somebody who didn't wallow in self-pity in prison and just say it's not fair. Thank you that he made the best of things in prison, and help us to always make the best of things too, and to be kind to other people who we meet. Thank you, and help us to remember that wherever we are, whatever we do, that you are with us always. Amen.